Hello everyone. In the last few lectures, you have seen that how we can write functions in C. In particular, how to pass arguments and parameters in the function, how to write certain activity within the functions, and based on that, how to return a result from that function. Today we are going to discuss about a process involving function which we call recursion. In English, recurse means that something is dependable on itself or something can call itself. So recursion are a particular types or technique of using functions where we can call the same functions within itself. You might be wondering that why we need such kind of a thing, but it is absolutely essential in many facets of problem solving, where sometimes we need to solve a bigger instance problem and we can decompose the problem into smaller sub-instances. Then solve those sub-instances by calling the same function. So it's going on decompose and decompose and decompose unless and until we get into very small sized instance which we can directly know the answer. Then we combine those answers and move up the ladder by recomposing those answers or solutions and finally produce the solution of the bigger problem. So this is the overall philosophy of how recursion is activated. Today's lecture we will try to see that what is recursion and how we can enable using C language these recursive techniques. As I already mentioned, recursion is a process by which a function x can call itself. So when a function can call itself, we call it as self-recursion. There are other forms of recursion also possible, that a set of functions can mutually call itself within themselves. So x can call y and y can call x, it's a mutual recursion. To give you a small example of recursion, just try to remember how do we compute factorial of a number. When we try to compute factorial of a number, it is nothing but the factorial of the previous number multiplied with n. This indeed introduces us to the concept of recursion again, that I compute a function of n instance or the input being the n. I can compute the same function with a smaller instance, that is the input of that function being n minus 1, and from the results of that function I multiply it with n, produce the final one. So here calling factorial n minus 1 from the function factorial n is one of the decomposition steps, and we keep on decomposing it until we reach to find factorial of 0, which we know as a base case, what we say, and directly return the result. Then we move up the ladder hierarchically and finally compute factorial 1, then 2, then 3 and up to n, and finally get the result for factorial n. We will see in details in some of the future slides that how this computation effectively being done in recursion. Before that, the primary conditions of recursions are as follows: that we need to decompose the problem into smaller size problem and keep on repeating or recalling those same smaller size functions again and again. So there must be some stopping condition. Here in our factorial example, the stopping condition was factorial 0, which we can directly know and can directly supply the solution of the result. The rest is the recursive definition, that we recursively define a function with that function of smaller instances. So basically the conditions of recursions are twofold. One is how you recurse and one how you stop when you reach the base condition. Let us see some more examples, factorial being one of them. Try to remember from your high school mathematics that how do you compute the GCD of a number. See, GCD computation, if you right now try to do on your notebook, you will see that to compute a GCD between two different numbers, you go on doing the same technique again and again by reducing one number to a lesser than its previous. For example, if you see, if I want to compute GCD of m and n, if my m is more than n, then what I do? I try to find the remainder, or I try to find the remainder of m divided by n, which we denote as m percent n. It means if I divide m by n, what will be my remainder? Then remainder with respect to the smaller number, I again go on compute GCD. So effectively, this is a recursive definitions that we are giving when m greater than n. And you see, if you try to do it in a notebook, you exactly follow this, unknowingly that it's a recursion of the same process. Now, when you write the GCD function, I can easily write or call the GCD function of smaller instances from itself, which is the recursive part. Then, finally, if you remember, when we stop and declare an answer, when both numbers are same. When both numbers are same, we declare that number being the answer of the GCD, and thereby we decompose and get the final solution of m and n from where we started with. Many of you also know there is a series called Fibonacci series. Actually, the essence of this series is that every number is a sum of its previous two numbers. So the first two are the base or the initial conditions which are provided to us. We know that first two numbers are 1 and 1. The third number is 1 plus 1, 2. Fourth number is 1 plus 2, 3. Fifth number is 2 plus 3, 5. Sixth number is 3 plus 5, 8, and so on. So therefore, immediately you can figure out that here to get a Fibonacci number of n, to get the nth Fibonacci number, I need to add the n minus 1th Fibonacci number and n minus 2th Fibonacci number, which is essentially our recursive definition. And doing so, since I am reducing it either by 1 or by 2, I will reach upon a case where I need to find Fibonacci number of 0 and Fibonacci the 0th and the first Fibonacci number, which are given to me as 1 and 1. So these two are the base cases or the in this particular recursive formulation. So this way we formulate recursive problem by calling the same function again and again. To give you a C kind of an example of this, let us again see the factorial. So factorial, you see the recursive definition can be very easily translated into the code by saying that if my n is equal to 1, that is my base condition, I know the answer is 1. Even if you can say here n equal to 0, the answer is 1 because we know 0 factorial is 1. And our recursion every time tries to reduce the input by 1. So eventually it will reach either 1 or 0. So therefore the base condition should be eventually reached in order to terminate this function successfully, not going into infinitely executing and calling the smaller instance functions. Rest is the recursive call, which is the answer of the smaller instance function. So this is again a call to the same function with n being n minus 1. In this way, finally, when this last n minus 1 factorial will be returned, then I will multiply with it n and give the result of this factorial n from this function. To see the execution, let us try to follow this particular schematic. Suppose we try with determining factorial 4. To determine factorial 4, first you compare 4 with 1. It is not the case, so you come to the else block. And there you compute 4 into factorial 3. That means to return this block or before returning this block, you want the answer of factorial 3. So you again call the factorial n function with n being 3. Therefore, again you see the same thing, 3 is not equal to 1, you go to the else block. To return to this factorial 3 answer, I first need to compute factorial 2 answer, then multiply by 3. Then only I can get this, and after that then only I can get factorial 4. So this step of going down this ladder, we call it as decomposition. So we decompose the problem into smaller subproblem. Again factorial 2, the same thing, needs to be solved as factorial 1. Now when I reach as a factorial 1, since our base condition is 1, so here 1 equal to 1 matches the first time I come to a position where I can return something. Then comes the recomposition phase. So when you return, you recompose the previous instance or the open function in the previous step by multiplying 2 into 1, which is the 2, and you return again here. So factorial 2 becomes 2, getting returned from the previous one. Then factorial 2, that is 2 into 3 becomes 6, get returned here. Then 6 into 4, 24 get returned to the main function, which is this when you execute and come out of. So this is the overall process where we go down the ladder is called decomposition, and gradually hitting upon the base case when we come back up to the ladder is called recomposition. So this interplay of decomposition followed by recomposition in a top-down manner is the primary intuition behind the execution of such recursions. So let us try to see that in this. So the important point here in this particular decomposition is that each time when you try to call a function with a different instance, that is factorial 4 needs to call factorial 3, factorial 3 needs to call factorial 2, and so on. So each time you will see that each of these variables inside the scope of this function are allocated a different memory chunk or memory space. So we can also find out if we try to print that where it happens. So see, the same function I have written. The only difference I made here, I included a printf statement here where I want to see that what is the input data it takes, that particular instance. And data is nothing but I want to know the address of the data, so that I want to see that each of these function instance that I call take a different positions in the memory. It is not the same position getting updated, it's a different location. So and data is the location where data is stored, and value is the location where value is stored. Hereby value is nothing but the resultant factorial. So value becomes data into fact data minus 1. Okay. So this is what I want to see now. So if you now execute, you will see first I started with factorial 4, let us say. If I execute, so scanf scans this 4, then you call y equal to fact x, so this function first time get called. So your printf data will be 4. You see the data location here and you see the value location here. Then it needs to call factorial 3, so data becomes 3. Now see that data location of 3 as well as the factorial 3 calling creates a different position in the memory. That's why the address where this value when the factorial 3 is being called and the address when of this data are too different than the previous one. So each instance, so the bottom line to say here is that each instance of the problem is a different instance, and also the data that are present inside the scope of a functions are recreated for all those instances until and unless we find out a return when those data are no more valid. So here at the end when I hit upon 1 and return the answer as 1, then when I come up to the factorial 2 function scope, then this part of the data or the memory is no longer valid, and some other program may take those memory as well if required. So this is to show you that since we decompose while we unfold the problem, we create new instances in the memory to store the intermediate computations, so that after recomposition, as we have seen here, it can recreate the solution of the previous and then recreate previous to previous solution and go up and finally get the answer. Let us go to another example, which is a Fibonacci number. You can easily figure out if this is my recurrence or the recursive formulation where it is 1 if the 0th and the first Fibonacci number is 1, the rest is the added value or the sum of 2 previous Fibonacci numbers. Then it is very easy to code. Just if you say this is 1, you can say else, even if you do not say, because otherwise it will call this one unless it hit upon the base case where it returns. So this simple program, if you try to see how does the decomposition and recomposition happens, you will figure out that if we call it using fig 5, then it will call fig 3 and fig 4. Each separate functional entities it called having separate data, the scope, its scope being creating separate data in the memory positions. Fig 3 being calling fig 1 and 2, fig 4 again 2 and 3, and so on. Until I hit upon a case where I reach either fib 0 or fib 1, which is my base case, that is inside the if block, I directly return the value 1. When I return the value 1 here in pink, then fib 2 gets computed by adding these two values, which is 2. fib3 is being computed by adding fib1 value and fib2 value upon returning, and so on. So now look at this scenario, that how many different function instances and accordingly how many different memory locations are being created, and that's why we finally get this fib5 value after exploring this tree, or after exploring this whole recursive tree from top to down, which we call decomposition, and from bottom to up by composing the value and getting the final result. This is another very simple example. There is no need to invoke recursion here, but to show you that recursive computation can also enable this, I need to result the sum of the squares between numbers m to n, that is m square plus 1, m plus 1 square plus m plus 2 square plus m plus 3 square up to n square. So I want the sum of squares within the range m to n. So what will be your base condition? If m is equal to n, then you can directly return the sum as m square. What is your recursive definition? I can split it in the middle, that is here, it's my middle element, and can call the sum of square as m up to middle and plus middle plus 1 up to n. Because sum of square from m up to middle will give me the answer when we go on decomposing and come back to decomposing after just the previous instance. It will give me the answer of m square plus m plus 1 square plus and so on up to middle square. This function will give me the result of middle plus 1 square plus middle plus 2 square up to n square. And if we sum it up, that is our m square plus m plus 1 square up to n square. So this is just to depict that you can think of any problem using recursive thought process and can formulate it very succinctly and solve it. This recursion tree, I am not going into the details, because if you understood for the Fibonacci number, you can easily see. To give you a hint, see, I want 5 square plus 6 square up to 10 square. So what I do is 5 plus 10 is 15, by 2 becomes integer division 7. So one side split is again calling 5 to 7, the other side split is calling 8 to 10. That is 5 to middle and middle plus 1 to 10. So this answer, when we will return from this function, I will give answers from 5 square plus 6 square plus 7 square. I will give answers here from 8 square plus 9 square plus 10 square, which is respectively 110 and 245. But to compute this, again we will go on decomposing until we hit upon the base case, where those two m and n are equal, and I know 5 square is 25, 6 square is 36, and directly return that. And in this way we climb up the ladder and get the solution of the final 5 square up to 10 square sum. This is called, sometimes we call as recursion tree or annotated call. Now comes a famous recursion problem, which we will eventually study in every textbook and everywhere, which we call as the Tower of Hanoi problem. Here a mythological story goes like this, that the Lord Brahma is trying to move the disk just like the Tower of Hanoi problem, and he is trying to do it with 32 disks, and when he will move everything, then the world will end. That's a mythological perspective of this story. But the problem goes this way, that there are 3 pegs. We call this dandas as pegs. So in each peg we have certain disk assorted in terms of the bigger disk in the lowest position, next bigger is upon it, above it is the next bigger, and so the smallest one is the top one in terms of the size width. Now I want to move this all disk in this peg, of which is termed as left peg, to the right peg, taking the help of the center as an auxiliary peg. But I have only one constraint to satisfy here, that anytime I move a disk, there should not be a case where a smaller disk should reside below a higher size disk. So every time I need to place a smaller disk on top of the higher side, not the vice versa. That is not permissible. Now, how can you solve this problem first of all? And what are the number of moves you need to solve this problem? So now, the mythological story says, with 32 discs, the number of moves Brahma is making, we are still alive and the world is alive because he has still not finalized the moves to the right pole. But let us try to solve this problem. Here you see, the one of the beautiful thing here is that recursion comes to rescue in problem formulation. How? Because what I need to do is that this whole set 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 from left, I need to move to right. So my strategy would be the sub-problem that is 1, 2, 3, 4, this sub-problem. So I will call the same function to solve this sub-problem of only 4 disks from the top 4 position. And I will try to give the destination of those 4 disks to center, making my right as an auxiliary peg. So this is the same function I can call with 4 disks by pushing them into the center. I do not have to worry how it will happen because it will recursively happen if I have formulated the proper base case. Then the base case is if I have only 1 disk, I directly move it to the right position. That is the biggest disk, I will move it to the right. And again I will call the same recursion over the center 4 disk back to right, considering my left as an auxiliary. Let us first try to see the pictorial view. What I was saying. From A, I want to move all of them to C. Constraint, always smaller disk over bigger disk, not vice versa. So the recursion will take care, if I have less number of disks, I can call the same function. So I have the function which has from, to and an auxiliary. So I will call the same function with 4 disks from A to B, taking auxiliary as C. Then the base move, that is the biggest disk, directly to C. And then coming back here, I will move all these 4 disks again by a smaller instance sub-problem on top of C, that is my source is B, destination is C, taking the auxiliary help of A. So there are 2 recursive steps here. One is this one coming from the 4 disk from the left to the middle, and the last one where the middle 4 disk again recursively comes back to C. The rest is only one move. So therefore, for n disk, if I need, let's say, an number of moves, this is basically 2 into an minus 1 plus 1 move of the largest disk here. So we need to so the number of moves is an equal to 2an minus 1 plus 1. If you solve this, you will get 2 to the power n minus 1 as the result. So this is the steps we do. We do move top n minus 1 from left to center, considering the right as an auxiliary, move the largest disk directly from left to right, move the n minus 1 disk from center that was residing in center to right, considering left as my auxiliary. With this philosophy, if you have understood, then your recursive program is very simple. Base condition is when you have only 1 disk, directly move it from to 2. So the parameters are I have n disk, 3 pegs is given as a fixed constant. So n disk, you need to go from to with an auxiliary. So the first thing we do is that n minus 1 disk I put from to the auxiliary peg, considering 2 peg as my auxiliary. That is from A to B, considering C as my auxiliary. Then the last disk, that is the biggest disk, I move directly from to 2. Finally, the n minus 1 that was residing in aux, I move it to 2 with an auxiliary as from. Just the concept that we have formulated, we represented it here. And if you see the number of moves, for example, here, let's say if I give you just 3 disks, then you see the number of moves is 7. And I leave it upon you to prove formally that it could not be done less than that. So it is exactly 2 to the power n minus 1. You could not have a better strategy. Okay, that is for you to just think around it. Okay. So see, the moves are, if you now solve this problem and print in between, you will see exactly how to move from A to C directly with 3 disks. First, the topmost disk to C, then the second topmost disk to B, okay, and then the smallest disk was in C, will come back to the second smallest over B. That completes the 2 instance problem. These 3 steps, this first 3 steps completes the n-1, that is 2 instance problem itself. That is from A to B, the top 2 disk has been moved. Then this step, that is disk 3 is moving from A to C, is our base step. Then again the last 3 steps are moving the top 2 disk from the auxiliary peg, that is B to C. For instance, we'll take 15. So before disk 4 getting moved, all of these 7 steps are the 3 smallest top disk over the largest disk that we are solving. That is, from A we are moving it to B, considering auxiliary as C, those 3 disks. Then we move A directly to C, and this last 7 again is from B, those 3 disks that we have just moved, I need to put on top of C. If you follow this code, even if you write and execute, you will get exactly this. If you follow this code, this is recursively how we move the disks. However, let us try to relook at some of the recursive problem. Mostly, in some cases, since we are computing a function by itself, sometimes the subproblems solved are many, and the similar subproblem we go and solving many. If you recall the Fibonacci series case, see what we are doing is that for Fibonacci n, that is for Fibonacci 5, we are calling Fibonacci 3 and 4. Fibonacci 4 in terms again call Fibonacci 3 and 2. And as per our earlier understanding, we have found that each of these different instances are taking different problem scope or the memory and recomputed and solved again and again. Which means this is not efficient in terms of the number of same subproblem solving many times. See here how many times Fib2 is getting solved. 1, 2, 3 times. Fib3 is getting solved twice. So how many calls are we making for each functions we are making? For n, we are making the call of the number of calls that are made by Fib n-2 and the number of calls that are made by Fib n-1 plus 2 number of calls into this. Just try to listen it very carefully. First question is how many function calls we are making. To compute Fib n, we are making one function call to Fib n-2 plus one function call to Fib n-1. So 2 function calls here plus the number of function calls required for n-2 and the number of function calls required for n-m all summed together with extra 2 for this Fib n. How many additions we are taking? We are taking one addition plus how many addition do we need to compute n-2 Fibonacci number and how many additions do we need to compute for n-1, because this in turn will create again a recursive tree, kind of a decomposed tree, where there will be multiple additions and then finally you will get this Fib n-1 result. Finally, after getting these 2 results, you add ones. So if I say the number of additions of Fib n is an, then an is equal to an-2 plus an-1 plus 1. If the number of calls of Fib n is, let's say, cn, then cn equal to cn-2 plus cn-1 plus 2 number of these 2 calls. So if you solve that, you will eventually found that is of exponential in nature. That is why it is not so efficient, because see, we want to compute nth Fibonacci number, which is just can be computed from the initial position one after the another in just n steps. Why we need to invest exponential number of calls and additions to do that? Therefore, iterative version of Fib is much less computation heavy, because what you do is that from the base case, you just store m1 and m2 as 1, and every time you just iteratively compute m3, then m4, then m5 and up to the nth number. So you once iterate over every number computation once, so you have n steps to compute the nth Fibonacci number. To be more precise, n-1 steps, because you are taking n-1 number of additions to do that. So now the question is that then is there a better way to do the recursive call so that we could eliminate again and again computation of the same function? There is, because see, one of the way could be that if you think out loud that whenever I call a function, if I could make a check that if the result of that function is available, then I will just pick up the result. If not, I will call. So here, when I call fib5 and to compute fib5, when I call fib3 and 4, I will first see from a table that if fib3 is available, then give me. If not, then I will call this. So next time when I come and go to call to fib3, the table will give me some answer. So that means I need to have an n-length table or array with me, initialized with -1 indicating it has not been computed at all. Whenever I try to compute this fib5, I will go third position in that array is -1. So okay, I need to decompose and recall. But when I go on calling fib4 and see there fib3 will be called and this function has already returned as being the first function, so I see that it is already there in the table. I do not have this bottom whole decomposition going anymore. Rather look up the table and go back. This is one of the strategy that we could eliminate that number of calling and those things to be of exponential in nature. But the penalty that we pay is the array that we need to extra take of n size, where we need to bookkeep which function is to be computed and which function has already been computed by some previous function instances. And that array should be made available to access from this function. However, if you look carefully that there is another alternative way where you may not use the array to that extent or the recursive the array to look up into it. Rather, you could modify the recursive parameters or the arguments so that it gives you that value. So instead, the philosophy goes like this. See, every recursive formulations when we make, we try to go from top down first of all. Now, going from top down creates, in case of Fibonacci, it creates multiple times similar sub-problems, which we resolve, and that is our computationally bad thing that we do. To stop that resolving, why not? What we do is that we just go on in a way that instead of going from top down, if we could go bottom up. Iteration shows us one of the philosophy to go bottom up. That is, we are going from the position 0 to position n. Here what we do, if you look at the recursive function, we first push as the base condition the number 1 and 1. And this, the fourth parameter, is the number, the ith Fibonacci number that we are computing right now. And we need to go till n. So whenever my n equal to I, then that will be my answer, that I will just compute the sum and I will return that. Whenever this is not the case, that means I have not till yet reached to compute then nth number, I just place m1 plus m2, that is my m1 becomes m1 plus m2 and m2 becomes m1. So now if you try to recall with the iterative function, exactly we do that. You see that I put m1 in the position of m2 and I put m1 plus m2 in m1 and gear up for the next iteration. So here also, instead of doing the iteration, I am using it recursively, but I am changing the direction of recursiveness from bottom up. In that way, I am reducing the recomputation of the same function again and again by these checks. So it's just a jugglery of the function. If you are still a little bit unsure that how this will happen, I would suggest that you just code this up and try to print intermediately what does these values take and how does it compute it. To give you a hint, it will be like this. So if you go on for 3, it will see that first m1 equal to 1, m2 equal to 1 we started, our n is to be 3 and the second instance we are computing, I equal to 2. Then with that, new m1 call will be 1 plus 1 which is 2 and m2 will take the value of m1 which is 1. Now my I equal to 3. Now it is in the base condition of the recursion because n equal to 3, I equal to 3, then m2 plus m1 equal to 2 plus 1 which is 3. If you go for 5, see 1 becomes 2, m2 gets the value of 1, your I becomes 3 not equal to 5. Again 2 1 becomes 3, so M1 gets 3, M2 gets M1, 3 2 becomes 5, M1 gets 5, M2 gets 3, and this way finally these two are matching, so I need to result out M1 plus M2, that is 8. So see, instead of going in a top-down decomposition, we just change the way we call this recursive function in order to go bottom-up. That's why we can solve recomputation of the same subproblems. So in summary, iteration is one of the way to make it more efficient in case of Fibonacci numbers, where the top-down decomposition creates multiple instances of the same subproblem to be resolved again and again, which creates computational inefficiency. Other way is that you could juggle it in such a way that recursion, so that you could compute instead of top down you go bottom up, and then again the same flavor of iteration you may get here also. The third way that we have not coded and explained, but explained in the first place, that you can also have an auxiliary array with you to store, even if you go from top down, you can store which function is already computed. I will not recompute again. I just read up and tell the answer. So that will just, in this case, you have an advantage that you are not using additional array space. That case, you have to use a n element space extra. So these are the ways or the juggleries that we could play around recursions. I would encourage you more and more to write any problem using a recursive flavor. Can you solve it and how to go by it, because that will create how the tree is being created, whether the problems are recomputed or not. With that, just let us touch upon one small thing which we call as a static variable. So see here in this example, if we go here, every time I need to give M1 plus M2, so that to keep the current value of the ith Fibonacci number alive when I go to the next level function. Let me repeat. Here you see every time M1 plus M2 suggests that is the ith Fibonacci number, I minus 1th Fibonacci number was in M1, so I plus 1th Fibonacci number in the next call will become added value of these two. If we hit upon a base, we will give the result. Now, this is kind of the number that we always need to remember and pass it on. However, if we declare the variable as static int instead of int, which we call as a static variable, this will create a unique address or unique space or storage in the memory, and it will get updated upon computing again and again. So you need not have to resend those M1 plus M2 and M1 values. Earlier in this case, each function call will create new memory instances. If you recall, we have already shown you in the earlier slides of factorial that it creates. So each time this Fibonacci function is being called, all the instances of each of these 4 parameters in the memory will create new variables. Therefore, we need to, if we can eliminate the creation of new variable by using static int, which is the unique space that is being created for M1 and M2, now only this n and I recursion will suffice. With n and I just can do again and again with a little bit of difference in writing the function. So static variable remain, the takeaway from this slide is not about the changing of the recursion, about the fact that we can have static variables which usually keeps reserved a memory space which can be reused again and again by different functions, and that address doesn't change upon creating new function instances. So to see whether I am telling correct, you can just write this code and print the value of the address of M1 and M2. You see at every function call, you see these two and of M1, that is the address of M1 and the address of M2 will never change. You see, every function instance call create that same. That means, though we are creating instances, my n and I or the other variables here, that is res and temp, these variables for different function calls will create or reserve different new spaces inside the memory. But since M1 and M2 are being declared as static, it will reserve unique space, and for across function calls, you can update the M1, M2 values and it will get invoked from or accessed from the same space. So it becomes the same. So that is the beauty of sometimes we use these static variables. But essentially, we do not encourage it because, see, if you create a static variable like this, M1 and M2, so across function call, it gets modified from all other function calls. So it reduces the chances of what we would say that within scope the activity. So it becomes open for other functions to access the same location and manipulate. So it is not a very good practice to every time use static, but sometimes this helps in terms of reducing the depth of parameters, the number of parameters that you pass on, or in some other cases that you will gradually see in this course. So finally, since we have, in case of Fibonacci primarily, we have seen two different notions of recursion and iteration. Both way can solve a problem. So there are some similarities as well as some dissimilarities between them. So first of all, the similarity is that repetition should be there. That is, you need to compute repeatedly certain functions again and again. That then only you can invoke both recursions and iteration. Recursion uses nested function calls, repeated function calls. Iteration involves explicit loop. Termination happens when iteration loop condition fails, and termination in recursion happens when the base case organized, that is, we reached at the bottommost layer of this recursional decomposed tree, and then now we cannot decompose anymore, we need to recompose and finally get back. Both can have infinite loops. I think you already got infinite loops in writing the iterations. Now when you start writing recursions, you will get even weird kind of infinite loops, which is very hard to debug. One of the suggestions is that you try to print the values based on which the recursion is taking place and see where the value is lacking to reach the base condition. So there is a balance when to use recursion and iteration. First of all, when you have the performance, as we see in the Fibonacci case, it's a bottom up, and recursion is the performance in terms of space is also very bad in recursion, because each time when you call a new function, a new record or a new instance values will be recreated in the memory separately. So it takes a space and you need to store everything. After a few slides, we will show what are the things that we stored in terms of recursions and you need to get back. So when you have a choice of performance is the key factor, then we primarily try to unfold the problem bottom up and solve using iteration. However, you can easily map recursion in your manual thinking. See, when we solve a problem, what we do? We try to first decompose from a bigger instance to the lower instances and try to solve the smaller sub-problems and thereby gradually building our overall solution. That is how humans think. The same in case of recursion. So the way you think of solving the problem can be directly mapped in your program. So that is the beauty. So we say it is good for software engineering or management because you are in practical scenario, your code will be handled by others too. You are not the sole owner or the sole user of your code. In big industries, there are many people writing your code, modifying your code, looking into your code. So if it is very crisp in understanding, and recursion is one of the very crisp form of understanding, you can figure out this. See, the iteration of Fibonacci here, looking into this program, you have to dig it down to understand it. Whereas if you see this program here, see, it's very simple. Just you can understand the essence. So therefore, it's easy for understandability, the recursion factor you need to choose. After also in the next courses, you will also learn that not only the easiness but also sometimes in problem solving, recursion is essential. Iteration may not give you good results, or that thought process cannot be embedded in iteration as well. So in summary, the characteristics of recursions would be that every recursive program can also be written without recursion. We have shown an example using Fibonacci. Recursion is used for programming convenience, not for performance enhancement, because it has a space over it. Every function instance creates the additional space. Sometimes if the function being computed has a nice recurrence from, then recursive code may be more readable, as we have already seen in Fibonacci. Now the only part that we have already not shown to you is that how such function calls are actually implemented in terms of memory. So while we are discussing about the factorial numbers, we have shown you that, see, the factorials call the lower instance or the lower number factorials, and every time a function call creates new data memory values, new data memory positions. How is it is actually being implemented? I will show you using pictures that what in the memory happens. Before that, we need to know a little bit of concept of stack in the memory. So a stack is nothing but there is one entry, and from that entry you need to exit. So whatever you put last should come out first. So therefore there are only two operations that is supported, that you push and take out or pop. So that is the basic principle of stack. Later in this course, we will also dig details on the stack operations and applications, but this is all you have to know, because we will use the term stack again and again in our in describing this call implementations. So whenever there is a function call, a set of activation record gets pushed. So the activation record means, see, when you call a function, what are the things you create? You create spaces for the variables we have seen. Now you need to also need to store that from which function I am being called and where I need to go back, because the last function will push the result to the top function, the top to the higher function, and the upper function, and so on. We will recompose, so you need to store. So therefore, if we say that what is the memory organization for function calls, you will see that if I call GCD AB, then this GCD function gets called. So whatever be the internal variable, this parameter int x, int y, these also are the local variables. So the activation record has a reserved space in the memory for those. Then all the internal variables also will create a new space. Then finally you need to come back here after returning. So once you call and come back, so you need to also store the return value with which you come back and the return address where you should come. Otherwise, programs are executed line by line. So after executing this, which is the next line I will do? I need to store that. I need to come here. So how does it be getting managed? So first the return address stored, because when you are here in the main program calling a recursive call, immediately the next address of the next line you store first. Then you come here, sense all the variables, store it, and finally the return value you store it. So this is a stack that is one above another, and so it is pushed in the top and also popped or taken out from the top. So after call it becomes this, and after return it becomes again taken out. So this is how we manage the function calls. This is how we manage the memory during the function calls, recursive function calls. In case of factorial, let's say we are computing ACB, that is A choose B, NCR we are computing it. So which is basically factorial n by factorial r by into factorial n minus r. Okay. So why I wrote factorial n by factorial n minus r, because it is, if you do not put bracket here, first the leftmost division will take place. With the answer, the second division will take place. If you put bracket here before factorial r and after factorial n minus r, an additional bracket, then we can just multiply instead of the second division. See, first I will call this NCR. NCR calls 3 times factorials. First this factorial, followed by this, then I will get an answer. So LV is local variable, RV is return value, RA is return address, acronyms we have used. So before call, first this NCR function's local variable, return value, return address is stored in the stack. Then 3 times you are calling, so 3 times calling of the factorial will be stacked over one another. First the last factorial call will come back, then the second last, then the last, and then finally the NCR will return. Okay, so this is the way how we manage the memory, or in terms of a stacked nature of each and every function calls. We keep the variable values, return addresses and all, and how we come back and get the values. This is what happens and what is being taken care when you execute the program internally in your computing platform. So in summary, activation records get pushed into the stack when a function call is made. Stack here means memory, but the term stack is being used because it is one-sided push and one-sided take away. Activation record is popped from the stack when the function returns, because no longer those set of variables, values and return addresses are required after you return back. That's why those are eliminated or popped up. So continuously you go on calling. So therefore you see that when you go on calling recursive functions again and again, new stack elements get one after another build up. You build up new elements. So here the problem of infinite loop is twofold. Not only you will see that your execution is going on and on, but if you keep on your computer with that infinite thing, without any base case, if you write a recursion, it will go on infinitely calling. So then your memory gets exhausted and you will see your computer getting hanging. You cannot move the mouse that way. So those problems creep up. Main thing is that you go on creating and calling new functions, thereby creating new records. In this way, the RAM or the execution space that you have, you are blowing it up until it has no space to run any other program, so your computer hangs. So activation records keep popping up when you termination condition of the recursion and you return, and it looks like you have a set of local variables and return value and return address. This is the primary three components that we keep in activation records that we need in our execution. So here example we have shown that how we write in main a recursive call. It's simple that we just from main we want to call factorial 3 and we write it this way, and therefore your factorial function here. So I just here there is one particular thing that I have done. I have put the int n here. You can also write int n inside here. So during the stack execution of this 3 calling, see 3 factorial I am calling. So factorial 3 will call factorial 2, factorial 2 will call factorial 1, factorial 1 will call factorial 0. Then there is a base case. Unlike the previous one where 1 is the base case, I put n equal to 0 here is the base case. So therefore this will be your course of operation. So what will happen? Main calls fact. When main calls fact, it starts, so this is a new function call, it will start creating an activation record with n equal to 3. Return value has yet not been solved, but the return address is the position of the main where I will return. Then when I have n equal to 3 being called here, so here again I will call fact 2 before I solve the answer and return from n equal to 3. So when we call fact 2, again a new activation record will be created with n equal to 2. Return value is yet not decided, but I have to return to fact, the previous fact, that is the fact with n equal to 3, I have to return there. N equal to 2 fact will call n equal to 1 fact again. I have to return to the previous fact, that is the fact with n equal to 2. This will call n equal to 0. Now I can get my return value as a base condition and I need to return back. When I return back, I pop or eliminate the top. Return here. Can compute the return value now, that is 1. Eliminate this because now I can compute the return and can return. So I can eliminate this. Come back here. I can compute 2 into 1 again. Return here to the first open fact. So see, the way the functions are being called and the way the functions are being returned are just the reverse. So the last function you call is the first to return. That's why this stack is in the practical memory space is also, we call it as a stack, because the last data activation records you need to keep is first to destroy. In this way, finally, when we reach here, we get 3 into 2, we call factorial 3. So here the 2 answer comes here, return value is 6. This returns to your main function that is in this position where you print the value. So this is the overall process that we follow. And this is the activation records getting modified, pushed and popped in according manner. So with that, if you have understood this clearly, this is a home exercise for you. So you need to, by hand, you just try to trace the activation records of this Fibonacci sequence. For n equal less than 2, that is for 0 and 1, I am just saying just return 0 and 1. Else return this 2 and this. See, x and y are the positions where these functions should return. So fn minus 1 should return back and come, the next position is here. So usually when you return something, you store the next position. So x and y are the value that after fn minus 1 returns, what is the address. So the return address will either contain main x or y, because main calls f4, here you have to return back. So that address you need to keep. Or when you call fn minus 1, you have to return back and execute b equal to this. So this address you need to keep, or you need to keep this address. Return values you need to keep, and the variables a, b and n you have to keep. So based on that, as I have shown for factorial, just try it by hand computing this as well as your recursion tree. You will come to know why this process is inefficient, as I have told that it calls exponential number of functions in Fibonacci. So you see your activation record of the memory stack will be exponentially large in terms of n. And therefore, solving it in a top-down manner is not so efficient, or in a recursive top-down manner is not so efficient in Fibonacci number. In terms of the memory space that you take internally, that is not visible to you, but you take this. Your memory needs this space too. And also in terms of the number of additions, number of computations, as we already see. So this, if you do, it's a hands-on exercise for you for better understanding. With that, we come to our end in our talk. That in this talk, we have learned how to write recursive formulations of a problem, how to decompose a problem, how to find the base case and start recomposing and getting the solution. How does in memory such activation records get created and added up when we call the functions again and again? And how we can efficiently turn around this top-down onto bottom-up approaches, or can use auxiliary space to recreate the formulation of recursion so that it becomes much more efficient. The primary inefficiency we have seen in case of Fibonacci number is from multiple times solving the same problem, which is a primary goal of writing good programs or efficient programs that we would like to eliminate. So this is a very powerful tool. At the end, I can only assure you that this is a very powerful tool of problem solving, because it just solves a problem as you think of it. You try to solve using sub-problems and it exactly maps that in your code. So with that, I would like to end today's lecture with a note that please practice this recursion, because the more you practice recursion, this thought process will go with you and you can write good programs. Thank you for your attention.